Welcome to Sleep Tight Frights, the place where bedtime stories don't always end sweetly. I'm Evergrey, your storyteller in the shadows. Each tale is a little strange, a little spooky, and just creepy enough to keep you peeking over the covers. So settle in, close your eyes, but don't fall asleep just yet. Welcome to Sleep Tight Frights, where the stories drift in with the tide, and not everything that howls is a warning. Tonight's tale takes us to Haida Gwaii, where 6 kids set up camp by the sea and learn that legends aren't always just stories, and sometimes they're watching. So zip up your tent, watch the sand, and don't dig where things are meant to stay buried. This is The Sea Wolves of Haida Gwaii. The summer trip to Haida Gwaii was supposed to be an adventure. 6 kids, 3 tents, and 1 crescent-shaped beach that wrapped around a forest like a secret. Juniper had never camped this far from town before. The ferry ride alone took most of a day, but she liked the misty trees, the driftwood-strewn sand, and the way everything smelled like cedar and salt. She didn't like the stories, especially the ones about the sea wolves. They walk on the sand when the tide goes quiet, Mason told the others their first night, flashlight glowing under his chin. You won't hear them. You'll just find tracks right next to your tent. Yeah, Rosie groaned, brushing marshmallow from her hoodie. Sea wolves aren't real. They are, said Kiki quietly, eyes on the water. My great-grandma said they only howl when something bad is coming. Juniper shivered. Something about the way he said it made the hairs on her arms rise. Their tents were pitched in a half-circle just above the driftwood line. The forest watched from behind, and the sea whispered from the front. That night, Juniper fell asleep to the cackle of a dying fire and the strange silence that followed it. No crickets, no waves, just the distant groan of water shifting. The next morning, Mason was pale. Something was outside his tent, he said. They laughed until he pointed. In the sand, tracks. Large, dog-like, but too big, too wide, and there were no claw marks. They led from the tide up around his tent and then vanished. Juniper traced one print with her finger. It was damp, but the sand around it was dry. Wolves can't swim, right? She asked. Regular ones can't, Kiki muttered. Each night the howling grew louder, not like coyotes, longer, deeper, wetter, like it came through the waves. And every morning the tracks grew bolder around Rosie's tent, across the campfire ash, even between the sleeping bags. The adults blamed the wild dogs, but there were no wild dogs on Haida Gwaii, not anymore. On the 4th morning, Rosie didn't come out of her tent, because she wasn't there. Her shoes were lined up beside the door, her flashlight on, and inside were damp footprints circling. The adults searched, the kids moved closer to the chaperone area, the beach was taped off, but that night the howling came anyway, louder, faster, like it was angry. Juniper stayed awake. She kept the zipper cracked, she held her flashlight, and she watched. Just before 2 a.m., the tide stopped moving. The wind died, and in the thick mist she saw eyes, low to the ground, far apart, watching, not blinking, not glowing, just waiting, and then they vanished. The next day the prints were all over, around every tent except hers and Kiki's. Talia vanished that night. Then Mason next. Both tents still zipped, shoes still lined up, only damp sand and round silent paw prints. Juniper couldn't breathe. Why aren't they taking us? She whispered to Kiki. Because we're not the ones who broke it, he answered. Broke what? Kiki looked towards the driftwood. They're not hunting us. They're protecting something. That evening, the 2 of them followed the tracks down the beach, past where the forest shadowed the sand. The tide was out too far. More sand exposed than they'd ever seen before. That's where they found the hole. It was enormous, fresh, uneven. Something had been unburied, and within the pit, bones, jagged, sea-worn, wound in kelp and crawling with crabs, a spine the length of a canoe, and a skull with too many teeth. Kiki stared in horror. They weren't just watching us, he whispered. They were trying to stop it. Juniper trembled. Stop what? But the answer came in a howl so loud the sand vibrated. Shapes emerged from the sea, at least 6. Wolves, but not wolves, coated in seaweed, salt glistening on their backs, eyes as pale as pearl. They moved without sound, surrounding the bone. Not attacking, not even looking at the kids, just guarding. Juniper and Kiki stepped forward. Together they began pushing the sand back, handful by handful. The sea wolves stood still. Only when the skull was covered did they move. They howled once, then vanished into the tide. By morning, the hole was gone. So were the bones. Rosie, Talia, and Mason back in their tents, shivering, soaked, but alive. The adults thought it was a prank, or a shared nightmare, or even dehydration. But Juniper and Kiki know better, because each summer they return. They watch the beach. They watch for the tide. And every year, they hear the wolves howl, not to chase, but to guard, just in case someone ever forgets what belongs buried and tries to dig too deep. Some say the wolves of Haida Gwaii were never wolves at all, but something older, something sacred, something that knows the difference between what lives and what should never rise again. If you ever camp near the tide and you hear howling from the sea, maybe don't run, maybe say thank you. Until next time. Thank you for listening to Sleep Tight Frights. It means more than you know, to us and to the things that listen back. I'm Ever Gray, your guide through the shadows, and if you felt something was watching as the story unfolded, you're not alone. They remember the ones who listen, they wait for the ones who return. So come back soon. Sleep tight if you can.